Jury nullification could save a life from rights-violating laws. Jury nullification occurs when a jury refuses to issue a guilty verdict against someone who fell victim to a law which opposed their human rights. For example, jury nullification was used in the fight to end chattel slavery in the U.S. The juries protected the human rights of the people who escaped enslavement by refusing to issue a guilty verdict for any crime which was done to preserve the former slaves' right to life, liberty, and dignity, regardless of the evidence. What the jury asked when facing off with racist and dehumanizing laws, such as the Fugitive Slave Act, was not, did this person technically violate the law, but rather, does the law technically violate the rights of the accused? Jury nullification is a way for the common resident to protect others from government corruption. Because of this, it is an essential example of the idea of consent of the governed being a requirement for federal or state laws to have coercive power. If the people see a law as a threat to life and liberty, they can refuse to lock someone up for breaking it. However, these terms should not be mentioned until the jury is fully selected, because judges, prosecutors, officers, beneficiaries of prison labor, and private prison owners hate the concept of jury nullification, because city municipalities fund themselves with fines and contracts. They often see jury nullification as a threat to their investments, so to speak. And so do the private prison companies, which want to lock up as many people as possible for the maximum amount of money, regardless of whether or not their constitutional rights are upheld. The people with roles mentioned earlier are stakeholders in people being punished for crimes. To them, the more punishment, the more money, even if the law generating that money is one that violates human rights. So when you have jury duty, pretend you've never heard of jury nullification. If you do mention it, the prosecutor will have you removed because your knowledge of it threatens the money they intend to take from the accused. To the prosecutor, this is not about constitutionally protected rights, it's about grabbing cash. If you are unaware, for the past few years, the Supreme Court, 6 members of it, have issued opinions against constitutionally protected rights on several occasions. I want to remind you that the process of changing the Constitution has to do with 2/3 of Congress agreeing to it. The Supreme Court cannot change the Constitution by issuing their opinions. However, municipalities may try to pass laws to cash in on the Supreme Court opinions which make you and your neighbors more vulnerable to corrupt and rights-violating laws. With jury nullification, you can protect someone in your local community from those corrupt and unconstitutional laws. I will quickly mention 2 recent cases where the Supreme Court issued opinions that disrespect the Bill of Rights. Noam v. Vasquez-Perdomo in September of 2025 and T v. Barbara in June of 2026. In Perdomo, the Supreme Court issued an opinion that the 1st, 4th, 5th, 8th, 13th, and 14th Amendments should be violated. The people who have never been suspected of committing a crime are to be stopped and interrogated without probable cause based on their religion, skin color, type of employment, language spoken, the community with whom they associate, and other factors that do not meet the standard of evidence for a lawful detention. Because of this, the Supreme Court openly disrespected the freedom of religion, the freedom of speech, the freedom of assembly, the right to be secure from warrantless searches and seizures, the right to due process, the right to be secure from cruel and unusual punishment, because the prisons where they are held without charge or before trial that could determine their guilt or innocence, break legal standards for nutrition, sanitation, rest, and others. And the right to be secure from enslavement, since the prisoners, in order to speak with their lawyers or members of their family unit, must work for a week to get one phone call with family members. All of these claims are backed up by the QR code, which leads to over 8,000 pages of articles written about human rights violations and crimes committed by our government against American residents. In T v. Barbara, 4 members of the Supreme Court argued against the explicitly stated constitutional right for Americans to have citizenship. Though the majority of the Supreme Court ruled in favor of that constitutional right, the fact that 4 of the justices were willing to openly ignore the text of the Constitution and why the framers of the 14th worded it the way they did should be alarming. It proves that the highest court in the land is at best narrowly respecting constitutional rights, which could be a disaster for the entirety of the Bill of Rights. If you aren't political, you may not know much that this has occurred, and you may not know how damaging data centers are to communities where they are built. Data centers use a tremendous amount of water. Even the ones that claim to be closed loop have ruined the drinking water of communities. The amount of energy data centers require has led to power outages in communities. Imagine having to throw away an entire fridge worth of food on a somewhat regular basis, all while the facility being in your city increases your electric bill. Data centers pollute the air of the community. Look at what happened to Boxtown, Tennessee, for a sample of what could come to your community. The reason I mention this in a crash course regarding jury nullification is this. There will be people who defend their communities from data centers, and you may not agree with their methods, but I hope you will do your part to respect their rights and protect them from being found guilty for any crime which has been done for the liberty of the people in your city. The same is true for those who resist the government overreach and well-documented thousands of crimes committed per day by the DHS, as well as the flock cameras, which are an attempt to create a surveillance state which openly violates your Fourth Amendment protections. The Constitution begins with this. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. So, if you get the opportunity to be on a jury, keep this in mind and ask yourself, is the law working against these aims? Does it seem like the person accused was working toward them? The time to fight for your kids' grandkids, to have a government which respects their rights, is right now. Thank you for reading this. And this is the QR code that is my archive of human rights abuses and crimes committed by the DHS.